This here is the Aries Game AT-M1. And I paid about 60 bucks for it, which I think is a pretty compelling price in 2023. Now this brand has had its fair share of, shall we say, issues in the past, and admittedly this isn't a quote-unquote household name in the PC industry, at least here in the States. So I'm fairly new to this brand. The case, however, looked appealing enough, and again, for the price, it was difficult to pass up for a budget build. It does have what looks like a very airy front panel, which is nice. It does have enough room for the hardware I intend to put in it, and it doesn't look like it's about to fall apart because it's made out of, I don't know, butter. So in this video, we're gonna give the Aries Game AT-M1 a walkthrough, we're going to build in the AT-M1, and then we're going to talk about whether or not it's actually worth $60. It used to be 60 bucks to get you a really awesome case, and now that really doesn't exist much anymore. So yeah, those that do remain in this price category often have issues. Are you ready? Stay with me. If you're looking for a way to rid yourself of that pesky Windows activation watermark, head on over to VIP SCD Key. Their mid-year super sale has Windows 10 Pro OEM keys at a special discount, meaning you'll pay only around 15 bucks to fully activate that OS. This will give you access to Windows 11 upgrades as well, custom wallpapers, and a few other benefits. Simply click the link in this video's description and select the version of Windows you are currently running, then pay with a secure payment method like PayPal. When the promo code box pops up, enter GSVIP, this is super important, GSVIP, and then watch that price fall by 30% down to around 15 bucks. And if you don't want to fiddle with upgrading from Windows 10 to 11 at the start, you can always buy a Windows 11 OEM key for around $20 with our code, again, GSVIP. And if you're curious, we'll discuss how to activate later in the video. The process is super simple. Find more great deals at VIP SCD Key by clicking the links below. Alrighty then, here we go. So looks like it's packaged well. This is kind of like that soft styrofoam, whatever this is called, and it's wrapped in a cheap plastic bag. Now, first impressions, this case is not very deep from front to back. So if you're building with a modern, super large graphics card, for whatever reason you're gonna put that in like a cheap case like this, you're gonna have issues. Just don't do it. Now, there are already a few things right out of the gate that you're probably not gonna like. I'll show them to you now. For starters, these thumb screws are not captive. This left side panel is not made of tempered glass. It's made of acrylic. Most of these PCIe slot covers are only removable via the little wiggly jiggly method here. Once you remove one, it's pretty much impossible to get back on because, well, yeah, you just have to buy some extra slot covers if it drives you crazy. I think this is super annoying. One of the biggest pet peeves of mine when it comes to cheap cases. It is what it is here. And the only fan included in this case can only be powered via Molex. This sucks. I've got to say though, elsewhere, this case does seem to impress. I think the most impressive thing is this airy front panel. I mean, like you can just see straight through the entire thing. So that's good to see. Thanks Aries Game for at least thinking about that. Not a lot of case manufacturers do in this price range. You can see you've got your front I/O up top here, two USB 2.0 Type A's. That's not impressive. Only a single 3.0 and no Type C. Not that I'd expect that in a $60 case, at least from a manufacturer like this. We've got a cutout here for our power supply if you're into that sort of thing. You don't, again, have a ton of space left to right. You're not going to be able to fit big graphics cards in here, especially if you have front intake fans. It does look like you can fit those in front of this mesh though, so that's cool to give you a little extra space if you want it. I'm probably going to remove this extra exhaust fan because this Molex is just, I mean, this is probably the grossest thing about this case, if I'm being honest with you. And then behind the motherboard tray, there's not a lot here. Again, no rubber grommets. You get a single 3.5-inch drive bay underneath, and then you get a 2.5-inch little drive holder thing here that is locked in by a single thumb screw. You're not going to be able to fit big power supplies in here if you're also fitting a 3.5-inch drive down below. Keep that in mind. And you don't have a ton of cable management room, maybe 1/3 of an inch. That's about all you're going to get here. What a lot of companies in the cheaper PC case game tend to do is reuse the same tooling over and over, and multiple brands will share this same tooling, the same chassis footprint. What they'll do is spice up, you know, the modular parts. Let's say the front panel. So this is probably an Aries Game front panel. Maybe it's shared with others, but you'll see, you know, different kinds of front panels on different brands of the same case. And that's just because it's cheaper to change just this aspect of it versus the entire frame. If, for example, Aries Game wanted to widen the area behind the motherboard tray to accommodate for more cable management headroom. That would require an entirely new tooling, and that means that they're gonna have to fork up for it. That'll raise the cost per unit for the end consumer, and then it won't be as attractive of a case from a price perspective any longer, especially if their target is as cheap a case as functionally possible. So just a bit of backstory there. It might look cheap to just barely widen a case, but that often involves tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in new tooling to pull off. Now it's time to assemble a build into the AT-M1. This is going to involve just a bare bones, kind of stripped down AM4 platform. We've got a Ryzen 5 3600 going into a B550 Asus Prime motherboard. We're going to pair that with 16 gigs of silicon powered DDR4. This stuff's dirt cheap. I think I got this for $30 on Amazon. Just ridiculous how cheap DDR4 is nowadays and how cheap DDR5 is quickly becoming. We're going to use the stock Raise Stealth cooler, and we've got pre-applied thermal paste. And with the rear IO shield installed, we're going to gently slide the platform into position. I noticed that we don't have additional standoffs at the right side of this motherboard, so the area closest to the camera here. That means our board's going to sag just a tad. A bit disappointed with that. We've gotten all basic wiring taken care of, and we've got it looking pretty clean back here as well. Looks like power supply sliding from the right side. I've got a nice compact BP550 here from EVGA if you're interested. All this, by the way, will be linked below if you want to build something similar. It's a bit difficult to wedge it in here when we've got cables already pre-run, but let's see, come on, something like that right there. Oh yeah, we've still got plenty of space closer to the front for our 3.5-inch drive, although we're not going to use it for this particular build. Gonna tighten it down and wire it all up. I've got three 120mm Silent Wings 4 fans installed. I think this is going to add a bit of spice, make sure things stay nice and cool. Obviously, it's going to cost quite a bit to add premium fans to a case like this. So say you get like a cheap pack of, I don't know, 3 fans for this case, about 15, 20 bucks. You're gonna wanna add that onto the price of the case because otherwise it's gonna run a tad hot. The rig is now looking fairly clean. Just gonna cut some zip ties back a bit. And then I think the only thing we have left to do is install the graphics card. We could also install storage. I totally forgot about that, but we're not going to be running the system for any decent amount of time. We don't need an operating system on it. I just want to see what it looks like. I'm not going to bother running extreme temperature test. It's very clear to me that this case is going to have great airflow. So the last piece of the puzzle then, this is an RX 7600. It didn't receive the best reviews. It's very difficult for any graphics card nowadays to receive good reviews, I suppose. But we've had this one sitting around for a bit. I figured we'd throw it into this rig. I think it's going to fit from a wattage perspective. We only have a 550 down here. And also from a depth perspective, right? A sheer size constraint that this case presents means that this card actually is going to fit nice and snug in here. There's a little cover here beside the PCIe slots with a thumb screw. And the thumb screw is just, I actually managed to do it just there. I couldn't do it before. That's interesting. I always hate it when they over torque thumb screws. What's the point of it being a thumb screw if you can't untighten it or retighten it with your thumb? I don't know. Anyway, there is the card. She's looking nice and pretty. And then we'll tighten it back down at the rear. Phew. All right, I think we are finished. So, are you happy with the way your PC build turned out? Round things out by activating your newly installed OS. Swing down to the Windows Start tab, type activation, and then click Enter. Select Change or Add Product Key, and paste your activation code. If you're entering it manually, triple check that you've typed it correctly, then click Activate. From here, Windows will work its magic, and you should notice your watermark disappear. You'll then have a fully activated copy of Windows 10 that you can even upgrade to 11 if you'd like. Just keep in mind that OEM keys like these lock to the hardware in question, so any major platform changes may require a new code for activation. Then again, I don't know too many folks swapping motherboards on a daily or weekly basis, and even if you did, it's what, 10, 15 bucks to reactivate? Not a big deal. You'd have to do this several times to break even on a retail key. VIP SCD Key's mid-year super sale is going on for a limited time, so be sure to snag your key before it's too late. You can even find other useful software at solid discounts for productivity and the like. Just click the links below in the video description, and remember to use our offer code GSVIP, again, GSVIP, for a huge discount. Now I know this might not be the most exciting looking PC build out there, but I think for the price, I mean, if you tallied all of this up, and this is a pretty sweet budget rig, you could definitely cut some corners and definitely save in the graphics card department if you wanted to buy something that was a bit better value, especially used, maybe on eBay. But elsewhere, I think it turned out really nice. I'm a little annoyed about the fact that this power supply doesn't actually like extend all the way across this cutout in the basement. That looks a tad tacky, although that's more a product of like what I chose as a power supply. You've got your fans up front. Of course, you could go with cheaper options there, but I recommend populating at least 1 or 2 of those slots there. You're going to have passive heat dissipation up top through the grill here and then also at the rear. I'm not really too worried about putting an exhaust fan in this setup because, well, you've got relatively low TDPs for both the CPU and the graphics card. Now, my biggest concern is this right side panel going on because as you can see, we don't have a ton of wiggle room here, and I've done my best to just, you know, flatten these cables as much as possible. And we don't even have like a 2.5-inch drive back here or a 3.5-inch drive. That's only going to add more clutter. I don't. Is that enough? I guess it is. So as long as you get it slotted in toward the front, you can just kind of hinge it at the rear and then use these thumb screws. That actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It looked like it was going to be a tighter fit. But yeah, there you go. No real bulging or bending of any kind. I mean, considering what we're working with, I think this went on pretty easy. So let's go ahead and power it on then. There won't be much in the way of lighting in here. It's like that was intentional. And typically when you go the budget route, the RGB is either just a very like static thing, you can't customize it too much, or you don't get any at all. So this was intentional. Of course, the fans I chose, I could have chosen some RGB fans, but I didn't really want to illuminate this. I think that it looks really good as is, pretty much black all throughout. You've got some silver accents and a tad bit of red accents in the graphics card, and that's all. The system seems to have posted, it's calmed down a bit. There's no need to jump into the operating system. Like I said, I'm not going to run extensive temperature tests here. This will fare just fine for the price in the thermal department. So I think Aries Game nailed it there. There are other things though that I'm not super fond of in this case. For starters, I'm not a fan of having a single fan that is this cheap in a case of this price. It's like $60 is now considered like dirt cheap, which is crazy because $60 used to get you a ton like 2 years ago. I understand why builder sentiment is down nowadays, but it's almost like Aries Game just said, you know what, we need a fan in here. Let's put a fan in here and let's keep the cost as low as possible. And they put the cheapest thing they could find in here. Only being able to run it via Molex is just absolutely ridiculous. And it probably runs quite loud at that. So that's why I removed it. I think to be fair, you're gonna have to add another $10 or $15 to the price of this to make up for the loss in fans. You're gonna need maybe a 2 or 3 pack to really take advantage of the airflow in this case. You're gonna have to watch your, again, graphics card size constraints, especially if you're mounting a 360mm up front. You can mount a 360mm there, you can mount a 240 it looks like up top, you can mount a 120 at the rear. So cooling support is actually quite nice. Your tower clearance for a larger tower CPU cooler isn't very great. And of course, you've got the acrylic side panel, which I suppose I'll go ahead and install for you just so you can see what it looks like. I won't bother tightening it down. This is just for demonstration purposes. But you can see, I mean, it definitely looks cheaper than tempered glass. And you don't have anything covering the edges of this side of the chassis. There's no like black frame or anything to cover up all the holes and rivets and things. So yeah, it looks cheap, but it's a cheap case, so I can't complain too much there. I will say, however, that $60 a year or two ago used to get you a case like this with tempered glass. So just a sign of the times, my friends. So in all fairness, this is more like a $70 or $75 case. When you account for those extra fans you're probably gonna need, if you're willing to forego those at $60, it's a compelling choice. I didn't see too many issues with build quality. I think the cable management space could be a bit, you know, roomier, but what can you do with the tooling at hand? It's just crazy that this is what $60 gets you nowadays. I mean, I tried to find the cheapest mid-tower on Amazon, and this was right up there with among the cheapest. I think there was maybe a Zalman T7 that was slightly cheaper. We've already built in that and actually gave away a rig with that case. But there's not much that's cheaper that supports full-size ATX motherboards, and that was what I was really aiming for here. That's by far the most popular form factor. I mean, this is what we have to work with in the $60 department. Maybe you buy secondhand, maybe you buy used on eBay, you can find a better deal, but if you want brand new, it's tough to beat this price point. And honestly, I can't imagine you're gonna find much better at this price point in today's day and age. It's just, I hate to say it, but it is how it is. With that, if you'd like to build something similar to what you see here, I'm gonna have all these parts, like I said, linked in the video description. If you want to join our public Discord server, it's totally free to do. You can contribute however you like there, just a way for us to engage outside of solely YouTube or Twitter. If you want to support us on Patreon, that link is in the description. And of course, consider subscribing if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up if you thought it was cool, and leave a comment letting me know what you think about this case. Maybe I'm not being critical enough. That's totally possible. I think I've just kind of succumbed to the fact that cases are just more expensive across the board, so this is what we have to work with. Am I disappointed? Of course I am. But it's not really the fault of Ares games specifically. It's just the costs across the board, manufacturing constraints, just what we've been through over the past 2 or 3 years. It's kind of all culminated to this point where we're just paying more for certain things, including cases, unfortunately. So I'll leave it there. If you guys enjoyed it, again, thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. I'll catch you in the next one. My name's Greg. Thanks for learning with me.